I'm faced with three challenges. One is I'm after lunch, two is I'm after Siddharth, and three is I have to do this with data. So bear with me. All right, my name is Karan Mahesh. I handle the region for SDR. And throughout the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'll try and keep it as fast as I can. The timer is not started, but you can time me. I'll try and keep it as fast as I can. I'm going to try and talk to you and take you through global hospitality trends with a focus on India. Now, we present and tell a lot of stories all across the world, and we do this with the intent of trying to make hospitality data as contextual, as interesting as possible, so that you guys don't really have to do that yourselves. So we normally start off with this slide, and this slide is very famous because it presents a very clear and concise image of how RevPAR growth is trending across the world for different regions. But on today's session, I'm going to focus on how we turn the previous slide into something like this, which is our forecast for RevPAR growth for all markets that we do so for globally for 2025. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want you to end up with a forecast that looks like this for your markets or for your hotels. All right? So steps in forecasting. The first one is to start very big. So take a step back, look in macro trends that you're able to observe, and we do this by starting to analyze occupancy growths at a continental level. And we're looking at occupancy growth starting to stall globally, whereas India, on the other hand, represented in the orange, is somewhat on maintenance. The reason for this is because we're coming on the back of multiple years of recovery after the pandemic, and we're looking at global regions already reaching their 2019 levels, if not breaching it. Rates, on the other hand, still, of course, have a lot of steam. The one on the left is for context, which shows you year-to-date growth of 23 versus 22. And the reason I've put that there is because it gives you a clear image as to why 2024 is lower, because we're coming on the back of multiple years of high double-digit, if not high single-digit growths. The other note on rate is that rate is the element that is more volatile. The reason I say it is because that's the only KPI that is in the absolute control of the hotelier. Demand obviously follows that. So when you have high group demand or you have high citywide events, you increase your rate, it gives you confidence, and that's what leads to rate being more volatile. So obviously, we don't forecast at a continent level. We do so more for markets. But before that, we need to identify themes on what we're able to see in different countries, at least. So we'll start this by looking at Asia Pacific, closer to home, where we are, and we'll look at occupancy percentage change first. For all the different countries, you see from around February or March 2024, performance has largely normalized. So what are we going to see after this? We're going to see divergence start to kick in. And why divergence? Because some countries are going to continue their growth, some are going to go down. The examples of ones that are going down there, which we'll get into in a little more detail, is China and New Zealand. The other theme we are identifying is price sensitivity. Now again, we're coming on the back of multiple years of rate growth. So we're starting to see rate growth decline, but at the same time, we're starting to see occupancy growth increase. India specifically, when we speak of this sort of price sensitivity, that started kicking in around August, where you see those two lines transcend each other. Now, just for a westernized context, if we look at the Americas, that price sensitivity is a lot along class. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the upper upscale, luxury, and upscale classes, they're attracting the high-income traveler, not so concerned about cost of living or rising interest rates, which hopefully we'll soon start seeing decline, or something like that, or even inflation, right? But across the lower classes, we're starting to see that impact of price sensitivity kick in. India, on the other side, it's very similar when it comes to higher classes, where luxury, upper upscale, and upscale hotels have managed to hold that premium rate, sustain that growth, whilst at the same time increasing occupancy. Whereas in the lower classes, even though there is little to no occupancy growth, in fact, in the economy class, it's declining, there is an immense amount of rate growth that is still sustaining. So that's what's fueling business here. Now, speaking of drivers or what's fueling business, that varies by market. So I've attached 4 themes here. Number one, exchange rates. So the examples you're seeing are Tokyo and Singapore. The reason I've pictured Tokyo is because currency is deflated. That makes Tokyo or Japan as a whole very attractive to the foreign traveler who's earning in a US dollar. It's anywhere between 35 to 40% cheaper now compared to the USD pre-pandemic. So that's fueling growth there. Singapore's the inverse story. I stay in Singapore. I can say this. I can attest to it. It's super expensive. Why? Because that currency is appreciated the most in Asia Pacific. So that's exchange rates. Markets like Jakarta and closer home, Mumbai, have a lot of pricing power because they're dependent on a lot of domestic demand, which is fueling their books of business. They have a lot of group demand that is also coming in, small calendar events, but a lot of them. The next one is markets where there's business as usual. So everyone loves the capital city, whether we talk of Bangkok, Sydney, or Delhi, where we are in. It's business as usual. Hoteliers are not so worried about inflation in these markets because they know that that demand is going to come back in, as it always has. A slightly not so positive story is markets like Beijing or the whole of China, where consumer spending is slowing down, or markets like New Zealand, where we've hit stagnation and deflation in the economy. Another important theme here in India specifically, but also multiple markets globally, is groups. Now, groups in India, what sets it apart is that ever since 2022, groups are coming in at higher rates than transient business. And that seems to continue towards 2024 as well. Now, I'm surprised no one mentioned it till now, but we don't seem to be able to get away with a hospitality conference without talking about Taylor Swift or Coldplay. The next step is to get granular in your analysis. So by market, and I'm not going to get into every detail of every market, but if I look at occupancy growth over the previous year, and that's over 2023 for the year-to-date period, it's largely positive, barring two markets, that's Rajasthan and Goa. But if I bring in 2019 growth, that's where you start to see differences in certain markets where we've not yet fully reached pre-pandemic levels yet. So of course, what's driving growth? ADR, right? And if you look at the scale at the bottom, I'm not sure if you can see it, but it extends all the way up until 70 to 75% compared to pre-pandemic levels. And yes, this is a stacked chart, but again, this just shows the power of what hoteliers like this in the room have been able to achieve with their pricing. And within each market, you have variances as well. So this is a snapshot from our Costar product I took this morning. If I look at sub-markets within Mumbai, you can clearly see it pays to be in the south or in the Navi Mumbai and Thane markets, where we're looking at rate growths of high double digits, 16, 17, 18% running 12 months. The other granularity element is day of week travel. Now, hopefully this is to no one's surprise, but we've aggregated business markets like Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, Calcutta, Hyderabad, etc. And you can clearly see that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday have the most pricing power. Those are the days of the week where there's a lot of growth coming in. What's a little surprising or speaks to trend changes in travel is when I bring up leisure there. So that's Goa, Jaipur, Jodhpur, Agra, and Udaipur. Friday and Saturday at the very right side over there, occupancies are declining, but there is high pricing power, but there's most of it on a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday as well. The next thing is to learn from the past. So look at repeating patterns of what's happened in the past and how they can repeat themselves in the future to enable a better forecast. Now, this is very interesting. We did this analysis for multiple countries and it holds true. It so happens that weekly occupancy highs and lows mirror the past if your year started off on the same day. So here 2024, Jan 1st was a Monday, 2018, Jan 1st was a Monday, and you can see weekly occupancy is kind of almost similar, and at the middle there you can start to see the variance in that. If I was to collate the entire variance, it's at 4.8 percentage points higher. That's it, right? Now that's both a not so positive story, but at the same time speaks to repeating patterns, and 2025 is going to be similar to 2014. The next thing that repeats itself, holidays, and arguably one of the biggest holidays in the country which we are approaching soon is Diwali. So we looked at how 5 years into history Diwali has panned out. So what these bars represent is occupancy rate and RevPAR percentage change for the Diwali week over that entire month. Now, hopefully to no one's surprise, we all know that occupancy is not that high during the Diwali week. However, the business that does come in is mostly leisure driven and hence comes in at a higher rate. But if I focus on these 2 years, 2018 and 2023, rates have not managed to lift themselves up during the Diwali week, and quite surprisingly, as a result, occupancy has gone down further. So that speaks to two things primarily. One is the occupancy that you get during Diwali week is not very price sensitive. And two is, let's look at how we're positioned for the coming Diwali. Not that great news, but as a country, we are 13% behind the previous year for the Diwali week if we look at future business on books. So that's some food for thought. The next thing that's granular is compression. Now, compression basically means nights where occupancy is above 90%. So I've looked at Mumbai and Delhi because two major markets where there is a lot of demand. And I've looked at 3 periods, 2019, 23, and 24. The green bars show you how many room nights in that occupancy bucket are available. And the blue shows you what rates that business comes at. Two key takeaways. One is this. It's a positive story here. So there's not as many nights in the less than 70% occupancy bucket. There's more in the 70 to 80%. However, you can also start to see that the premium that extra occupancy push gives you is a lot more. And in the inverse story, as occupancy is lower, it becomes much more competitive. So that 5.5% is the premium in rates that a 70 to 80% occupancy night is able to achieve over the previous bucket. 80 to 90 and you have 14% higher rates. More than 90%, you have 50% higher rates. So that speaks to what's driving these rates and how that's going to evolve into the future. The last step is to cheat where you can. So we know a lot about what the future holds, and in some cases, we can use that to our benefit to arrive at a better forecast. Like people spoke in the morning as well, international demand is not back to pre-pandemic levels again, but domestic was already back in 2022. International is forecasted to get back to pre-pandemic levels towards the end of this year, if not beginning next year, and that's going to continue to grow. So we know that. What else do we know? Historically, if you look at supply in this country, and this is branded organized supply, the upscale and the upper mid-scale classes have grown the least. What about the future? Now, while a large percentage of inventory lies in the luxury upper upscale segments or chains, there's a lot of independent supply that's coming in. And a lot of that supply is going to lie in the upper mid-scale or mid-scale classes. Now, these independents include non-branded hotels or non-chain affiliated hotels, and that's also conversion opportunities for the brands and operators in the room. What else is coming up? Winters. Now, I looked at occupancy difference for this year, for the next 90 days, compared it to last year by markets and by day of week, okay, or type of weekday. Some markets are well covered, so New Delhi, Chennai, Bangalore, etc. Rajasthan also to a degree, weekend demand is growing there. Whereas some markets like Mumbai, Goa and Kolkata, not so well covered compared to what they were previous year, right? You can dive further into that by looking at which days of the week are impacted. So look at Thursday and Friday, where Mumbai is impacted the most when you look at the next 90 days. I still have 2 minutes and 10 seconds left. And Monday and Sunday, which are the most impacted for Goa. What else is coming up? I said we cannot get rid of a conference without mentioning this. Coldplay. So another thing you can use forward data to your advantage for is by looking at how occupancy is building up. Now, Coldplay announced their concert dates for 3 dates in Mumbai. 2 shows were announced initially. The 3rd show was announced later. I can clearly start to see how demand picked up there. And the 18th of Jan, which if I'm not wrong, is a Saturday. The entire market is already sitting at about 50% occupancy on the books. So knowing all of what we know, what can we do to summarize this, right? Number one, occupancy is stabilizing globally. India is on a balancing phase. So there is a little bit of rate growth, there is a little bit of occupancy growth, but you can start to see price sensitivity kick in. Rates have been driving most of this growth all this while, but rate growth is going to start moderating. Groups are going to continue with their momentum, not just in India, but across the world. We're seeing this in many pockets. But in India, they're coming at higher rates than transient business. And obviously, it's not right to say this as a country specifically, so it's important to look at your own particular markets and what's driving business there. Compression demand is coming at a good premium in India, at least for Mumbai and Delhi, and softer nights are very increasingly more competitive. Now, depending on where you are and where your hotels are, the coming winter can either surprise or disappoint, at least as of where we stand right now. Incoming supply is largely in higher classes, but also independents that are coming in the upper mid-scale and mid-scale space. And lastly, international demand is yet to fully reach its 2019 peak, but that will continue to grow in its share of demand compared to domestic. Now, if you haven't been taking pictures all this while, and I have 8 seconds left, you can scan this QR code, and you'll get a copy of the presentation right on your phones.